Hi guys. We're reading Wonder. We're on page 10. Just to catch you up, the little boy's name is Augie, and he doesn't go to school because he had lots and lots of surgeries, and he's 10 years old. His sister's name is Vi. I think her name's Violet. That's short for Vi. We're going to start with, the chapter says driving. It was a long drive home. I fell asleep in the back seat like I always do, my head on Vi's lap, like she was my pillow, a towel wrapped around the seat belt so I wouldn't drool all over her. Via fell asleep too, and Mom and Dad talked quietly about grown-up things I didn't care about. I don't know how long I was sleeping, but when I woke up, there was a full moon outside the car window. It was a purple night, and we were driving on a highway full of cars, and then I heard Mom and Dad talking about me. We can't keep protecting him, Mom whispered to Dad, who was driving. We can't just pretend he's going to wake up tomorrow and this isn't going to be his reality, because it is, Nate, and we have to help him learn to deal with it. We just can't keep avoiding the situations that... So sending him off to middle school like a lamb to the slaughter? Dad answered angrily, but he didn't even finish his sentence because he saw me in the mirror looking up. What's a lamb to the slaughter? I asked sleepily. Go back to sleep, Augie, Dad said softly. Everyone will stare at me at school, I said, suddenly crying. Honey, Mom said. She turned around in the front seat and put her hand on my hand. You know, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But we spoke to the principal there and told him about you, and he really wants to meet you. What did you tell him about me? How funny you are and how kind and smart. When I told him you read Dragon Rider when you were 6, he was like, wow, I have to meet this kid. Did you tell him anything else? I said. Mom smiled at me. Her smile kind of hugged me. I told him about all your surgeries and how brave you are, she said. So he knows what I look like, I asked. Well, we brought pictures from last summer in Montauk, Dad said. We showed him pictures of the whole family and the great shot of you holding that flounder on the boat. You were there too. I have to admit, I felt a little disappointed that he was part of this. We both talked to him. Yes, Dad said. He's a really nice man. You would like him, Mom added. Suddenly, it felt like they were on the same side. Wait, so when did you meet him? I said. He took us on a tour of the school last year, said Mom. Last year, I said. So you've been thinking about this for a whole year and you didn't tell me? We didn't know if you'd even get in, Augie, answered the mom. It's a very hard school to get into. There's a whole admission process. I didn't see the point of telling you and having you get all worked up about it unnecessarily. But you're right, Augie. We should have told you when we found out last month you got in, said Dad. In hindsight, said Mom, yes, I guess. Did that lady who came into the house that time have something to do with this? I said. That one that gave me the test? Yes, actually, said Mom, looking guiltily. Yes, you told me it was an IQ test, I said. I know. Well, that was a little white lie, she answered. It was a test you needed to take to get into the school. You did very well on it, by the way. So you lied, I said. A white lie, but yes, sorry, she said, trying to smile when I didn't smile back. She turned around in her seat and faced forward. What's a lamb to the slaughter, I said. Mom sighed and gave Daddy a look. I shouldn't have said that, Dad said, looking at me in the rearview mirror. It's not true. Here's the thing. Mommy and I just love you so much. We want to protect you any way we can. It's just sometimes we want to do it in different ways. I don't want to go to school, I answered, folding my arms. It would be good for you, Augie, said Mom. Maybe I'll go next year, I answered, looking out the window. This year would be better, Augie, said Mom. You know why? Because you'll be going into 5th grade, and that's the first year of middle school. For everyone. You won't be the only new kid. I'll be the only kid who looks like me, I said. I'm not going to say it won't be a big challenge for you, because you know better than that, she answered. But it'll be good for you, Augie. You'll make lots of friends, and you'll learn things you'd never learn with me. She turned in her seat again and looked at me. When we took the tour, you know what they had in their science lab? A little baby chick that was just hatching out of its egg. It was so cute, Augie. It actually kind of reminds me of when you were a little baby with those big brown eyes of yours. So he's trying to go to middle school. Dad and Mom wanted to go to middle school, 5th grade. I usually love it when they talk about when I was a baby. Sometimes I want to curl up in a little tiny ball and let them hug me and kiss me all over. I miss being a baby, not knowing stuff, but I wasn't in the mood for that now. I don't want to go, I said. How about this? Can you at least meet Mr. Tushman before making up your mind, Mom asked. Mr. Tushman, I said. He's the principal, answered Mom. Mr. Tushman, I repeated. Tushman, I know, right? Dad answered, smiling and looking at me in the rearview mirror. Can you believe that name, Augie? I mean, who on earth would ever agree to have a name like Tushman? I smiled, even though I didn't want to let them see me smile. Dad was the one person in the world who could make me laugh, no matter how much I didn't want to laugh. Dad always made everyone laugh. Augie, you should go to that school just so you can hear his name said over the loudspeaker, Dad said excitedly. Can you imagine how funny that would be? Hello, paging Mr. Tushman. He was using a fake high old lady voice. Hi, Mr. Tushman. I see you're running a little behind, today. Did you get rear-ended again? What a bum rap. I started laughing, not even because I thought he was being that funny, but because I wasn't in the mood to stay mad anymore. It could be worse, though, Dad continued in his normal voice. Mommy and I had a professor in college called Miss Butt. Mom was laughing now, too. Is that for real? I said. Roberta Butt, Mom answered, raising her hand to swear. Bobby Butt. She had huge cheeks, said Dad. Nate, said Mom. What? She had big cheeks is all I'm saying. Mom laughed and shook his head at the same time. Hey, I know, said Dad excitedly. Let's fix them up on a blind date. Can you imagine? Miss Butt, meet Mr. Tushman. Mr. Tushman, here's Miss Butt. They could get married and have a bunch of little tushies. Poor Mr. Tushman, answered Mom, shaking her head. Augie hasn't even met the man yet, Nate. Who's Mr. Tushman, Via said groggily. She had just woken up. He's the principal of my new school, I answered. Next chapter says, Paging Mr. Tushman. I would have been more nervous about meeting Mr. Tushman if I'd known I'd also be meeting some kids from the new school, but I didn't know, so if anything, I was kind of giggly. I couldn't stop thinking about all the jokes Daddy had made about Mr. Tushman's name. So when me and Mom arrived at the Beecher Prep a few weeks before the start of school, and I saw Mr. Tushman, the school's name's Beecher Prep. He didn't look at all like what I pictured, though. I guess I thought he would have a huge butt, but he didn't. In fact, he was a pretty normal guy. Tall and thin, old but not really old. He seemed nice. He shook my mom's hand first. Hi, Mr. Tushman. It's so nice to see you again, said Mom. This is my son, August. Mr. Tushman looked right at me and smiled and nodded. He put his hand out for me to shake. Hi, August, he said, totally normal. It's a pleasure to meet you. Hi, I mumbled, dropping my hand into his hand while I looked down at his feet. He was wearing red Adidas. So, he said, kneeling down in front of me so I couldn't look at his sneakers, but had to look at his face. Your mom and dad have told me a lot about you. Like, what have they told you? I asked. Sorry. Honey, you have to speak up, said Mom. Like what? I asked, trying not to mumble. I admit I have a bad habit of mumbling. Well, that you like to read, said Mr. Tushman, and that you're a great artist. He had blue eyes with white eyelashes. And you're into science, right? Uh-huh, I said. We have a couple of great science electives at Beecher, he said. Maybe you'll take one of them. Uh-huh, I said, though I had no idea what elective was. So you were ready to take a tour? You mean we're going to do that now? I said. Did you think we were going to the movies? He answered, smiling as he stood up. You didn't tell me we were going to take a tour, I said to Mom in an accusing voice. Augie, she started to say. It'll be fine, August, said Mr. Tushman, holding his hand out to me. I promise. I think he wanted me to take his hand, but I took Mom's instead. He smiled and started walking toward the entrance. Mommy gave my hand a little squeeze, though I didn't know if it was an I love you squeeze or an I'm sorry squeeze, probably a little bit of both. The only school I'd ever been inside before was Via's, when I went with Mom and Dad to watch Via sing in spring concerts and stuff like that. This school is very different. It was smaller. It smelled like a hospital. Nice Mrs. Garcia. That's the next chapter. Nice Mrs. Garcia. We followed Mr. Tushman down a few hallways. There weren't a lot of people around, and the few people who were there didn't seem to notice me at all, though that may have been because they didn't see me. I sort of hid behind Mom as I walked. I knew that sounded kind of babyish of me, but I wasn't feeling very brave right then. We ended up in a small room with the words Office of the Middle School Director on the door. Inside, there was a desk with a nice-seeming lady sitting behind it. "This is Mrs. Garcia," said Mr. Tushman. The lady smiled at Mom and took off her glasses and got up out of her chair. My mother shook her hand and said, "Isabella Pullman, nice to meet you." "And this is August," Mr. Tushman said. Mom kind of stepped to the side a bit so I would move forward. Then that thing happened when I've seen it happen a million times before. When I looked up at her, Mrs. Garcia's eyes dropped for a second. It was so fast, no one else would have noticed, since the rest of her face stayed exactly the same. She was smiling, a really shiny smile. "Such a pleasure to meet you, August," she said, holding out her hand for me to shake. "Hi," I said quietly, giving her my hand, but I didn't want to look at her face, so I kept staring at her glasses, which hung from a chain around her neck. "Wow, what a firm grip," said Mrs. Garcia. Her hands were really warm. "The kid's got a killer handshake," Mr. Tushman agreed, and everyone laughed above my head. "You can call me Mrs. G," said Mrs. Garcia. I think she was talking to me, but I was looking at the stuff on her desk now. "That's what everyone calls me, Mrs. G. I forgot my combination. Mrs. G, I need a late pass. Mrs. G, I want to change my elective. Mrs. G actually is the one who runs the place," Mr. Tushman, which again made all the grown-ups laugh. "I'm here every morning by 7:30, Mrs. Garcia continued, still looking at me while I stared at her brown sandals with the small purple flowers on the buckles. "So if you ever need anything, August, I'm the one to ask, and you can ask me anything." "Okay," I mumbled. "Oh, look at that cute baby," Mom said, pointing to one of the photographs on Mrs. Garcia's bulletin board. "Is he yours?" "Oh, no, my goodness," said Mrs. Garcia, smiling a big smile that he was totally different from her shiny smile. "You've just made my day. He's my grandson." "What a cutie," said Mom, shaking her head. "How old?" "In that picture, he was 5 months, I think, but he's big now, almost 8 years old." "Wow," said Mom, nodding and smiling. "Well, he is absolutely beautiful." "Thank you," said Mrs. Garcia, nodding, like she was about to say something else about her grandson, but then all of a sudden her smile got a little smaller. "We're all going to take very good care of August," she said to Mom, and I saw her give Mom's hand a little squeeze. I looked at Mom's face, and that's when I realized she was just as nervous as I was. I guess I liked Mrs. Garcia when she wasn't wearing her shiny smile. The next chapter says, Jack, Will, Julian, and Charlotte. We followed Mrs. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. We followed Mr. Tushman into a small room across from Mrs. Garcia's desk. He was talking as he closed the door to his office and sat down behind his big desk. Though I wasn't really paying much attention to what he was saying. I was looking around at all the things on his desk. Cool stuff, like a globe that floated in the air, and like a Rubik's type cube made of little mirrors. I liked his office a lot. I liked that there was all these neat little drawings and paintings by students on the walls, framed like they were important. Mom sat down in a chair in front of Mr. Tushman's desk, and even though there was another chair right next to hers, I decided to stand beside her. Why do you have your own room and Mrs. G doesn't?" I said. "You mean, why do I have an office?" asked Mr. Tushman. "You said she runs the place," I said. "Oh, well, I was kind of kidding. Mrs. G is my assistant. Mr. Tushman is the director of the middle school," Mom explained. "Do they call you Mr. T?" I asked, which made him smile. "Do you know who Mr. T is?" he answered. "I pity the fool," and he said in a funny little voice. He was like imitating someone. I had no idea who he was talking about. "Anyway, no," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "No one calls me Mr. T, although I have a feeling I'm called a lot of other things I don't know about. Let's face it, a name like mine is not so easy to live with you know what I mean." Here, I have to admit, I totally laughed because I knew exactly what he meant. "My mom and dad had a teacher called Mrs. Butt," I said. "Augie," said Mom, but Mr. Tushman laughed. "Now that's bad," said Mr. Tushman, shaking his head. "I guess I shouldn't complain. Hey, so listen, August, here's what I thought we would do today." "Is that a pumpkin?" I said, pointing to a framed painting behind Mr. Tushman's desk. "Augie, sweetie, don't interrupt," said Mom. "You like it?" said Mr. Tushman, turning around and looking at the painting. "I do, too. I thought it was a pumpkin, too, until the student who gave it to me explained that it's actually not a pumpkin. It is, are you ready for this? It's a portrait of me. Now, August, I ask you, do I really look that much like a pumpkin?" "No," I answered, though I was thinking yes. Something about the way his cheeks puffed out when he smiled made him look kind of like a jack-o'-lantern. Just as I thought that, it occurred to me how funny that was. Cheeks, Mr. Tushman. And I started laughing a little. I shook my head and covered my mouth with my hand. Mr. Tushman smiled like he could read my mind. I was about to say something else, but then all of a sudden I heard other voices outside the office. Kids' voices. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but my heart literally started beating like I just ran the longest race in my life. The laughter I had inside just poured out of me. The thing is, when I was little, I never minded meeting new kids because all the kids I met were really little too. What's cool about really little kids is that they don't say stuff to try to hurt your feelings. Even though sometimes they do say stuff that hurts your feelings. But they don't actually know what they're saying. Big kids, though, they know what they're saying, and that is definitely not fun for me. One of the reasons I grew my hair long last year was that I liked how my bangs cover my eyes. It helps me block out the things I don't want to see. Mrs. Garcia knocked on the door and poked her head inside. They're here, Mr. Tushman, she said. Who's here? I said. Thanks, said Mr. Tushman to Mrs. Garcia. August, I thought it would be a good idea for you to meet some students who'll be in your homeroom this year. I figured they could take you around the school a bit, show you the lay of the land, so to speak. I don't want to meet anyone, I said to Mom. Mr. Tushman was suddenly right in front of me, his hands on my shoulders. He leaned down and said very softly in my ear, It'll be okay, August. These are the nice kids, I promise. You're going to be okay, Augie, Mom whispered with her might. Before she could say anything, Mr. Tushman opened the door to his office. Come on in, kids, he said, and in he walked, 2 boys and a girl. None of them looked over at me or Mom. They stood by the door, looking straight at Mr. Tushman like their lives depended on it. Thanks so much for coming in, guys, especially since school doesn't start until next month, said Mr. Tushman. Have you had a good summer? All of them nodded, but no one said anything. Great, said Mr. Tushman. So, guys, I wanted you to meet August, who's going to be a new student here this year. August, these guys have been students at Beecher Prep since kindergarten, though. Of course, they were in the lower school building, but they know all the ins and outs of the middle school program. And since you're all in the same homeroom, I thought it would be nice if you got to know each other a little before school started. Okay, so kids, this is August. August, this is Jack Will. Jack Will looked at me and put his hand. When I shook it, he kind of half smiled and said, Hey, and looked down really fast. This is Julian, said Mr. Tushman. Hey, said Julian, and did the same thing as Jack Will. Took my hand, forced a smile, and looked down fast. And Charlotte, said Mr. Tushman. So it's Jack, Julian, and Charlotte. Charlotte had the blondest hair that I've ever seen. She didn't shake my hand, but she gave me a quick little wave and a smile. Hi, August. Nice to meet you, she said. Hi, I said, looking down. She was wearing bright green Crocs. So, said Mr. Tushman, putting his hand together in a kind of slow clap. What I thought you guys could do is take August on a little tour of the school. Maybe you could start on the 3rd floor. That's where your homeroom class is going to be. Room 301, I think, Mrs. G is. 301, Mrs. Garcia called out in front of the other room. 301. Mr. Tushman nodded. And then you can show August the science labs and the computer room. Then work your way down to the library and performance space on the 2nd floor. Take him to the cafeteria, of course. Should we take him to the music room? Asked Julian. Good idea. Yes, Mr. Tushman. August, do you play any instruments? No, I said. It wasn't my favorite subject on account of the fact that I don't really have ears. Well, I do, but they don't exactly look like normal ears. Well, you may enjoy seeing the music room anyway, said Mr. Tushman. We have a very nice selection of percussion instruments. August, you've been wanting to learn to play the drums, Mom said, trying to get me to look at her, but my eyes were covered by my bangs as I stared at a piece of old gum that was stuck to the bottom of Mr. Tushman's desk. Great, okay. So why don't you guys get going, said Mr. Tushman. Just be back here and he looked at Mom. Half an hour, okay? I think so, Mom nodded. So, is that okay with you, August, he asked. I didn't answer. Is that okay, August, Mom repeated. I looked at her now. I wanted her to see how mad I was at her, but then I saw her face and just nodded. She seemed more scared than I was. The other kids had started out the door, and I followed them. See you soon, said Mom. Her voice sounded a little higher than normal. I didn't answer. The grand tour. Jack, Will, Julian, Charlotte, and I went down a big hallway to some wild wide stairs. No one said a word as we walked up the third floor. When we got to the top of the stairs, we went down a little hallway full of lots of doors. Julian opened the door and marked 301. This is our home room, he said, standing in front of the half-open door. We have Miss Petosa. They said she's okay, at least for homeroom. I heard she's really strict if you get her for math, though. That's not true, said Charlotte. My sister had her last year, and she said she's totally nice. Not what I heard, said Julian, but whatever. He closed the door and continued walking down the hallway. This is the science lab, he said when he got to the next door, and just as he did 2 seconds ago, he stood in front of the half-open door and started talking. He didn't look at me once while he talked, which was okay because I wasn't looking at him either. You won't know who you have for science until the first day of school, but you want to get Mr. Holler. He used to be in the lower school. He would play the giant tuba in class. It was a baritone horn, said Charlotte. It was a tuba, answered Julian, closing the door. Dude, let him go inside so he can check it out, Jack Will told him, pushing past Julian and opening the door. Go inside if you want, Julian said. It was the first time he looked at me. I shrugged and walked over to the door. Julian moved out of the way quickly, like he was afraid I might accidentally touch him as I passed him. Nothing much to see, Julian said, walking in after me. He started pointing at the bunch of stuff around the room. That's the incubator. That big black thing is the chalkboard. These are the desks. These are the chairs. These are the Bunsen burners. This is a gross science poster. This is chalk. This is an eraser. I'm sure he knows what an eraser is, Charlotte said, sounding a little like Via. How would I know what he knows, Julia answered. Mr. Tushman said he's never been to school before. You know what an eraser is, right? Charlotte asked me. I admit, I was feeling so nervous, I didn't know what to say or to do except for look at the floor. Hey, can you talk? Asked Jack Will. Yeah, I nodded. I still really hadn't looked at any of them yet, not directly. You know what an eraser is, right? Asked Jack Will. Of course, I mumbled. I told you there was nothing to see in here, said Julian, shrugging. I have a question, I said, trying to keep my voice steadily. What exactly is homeroom? Is that like a subject? No, that's just your group, explained Charlotte, ignoring Julian's smirk. It's like where you go when you get to school in the morning and your homeroom teacher takes attendance and stuff like that. In a way, it's your main class, even though it's not really a class. I mean, it's a class, but I don't think he gets it, Charlotte asked Jack Will. Do you get it? Charlotte asked me. Yeah, I nodded at her. Okay, let's get out of here, said Jack Will, walking away. Wait, Jack, we're supposed to be answering questions, said Charlotte. Jack Will rolled his eyes a little as he turned around. Do you have any more questions, he asked. No, I answered. Oh, well, actually, yes. Is your name Jack or Jack Will? Jack is my first name. Will's my last name. Oh, because Mr. Tushman introduced you as Jack Will, so I thought, you thought his name was Jack Will? Laughed Julian. Yeah, some people call me by my first and last name, said shrugging. I don't know why. Anyway, can we go now? Let's go to the performance space next, said Charlotte, leading the way out of the science room. It's very cool. You'll like it, August. Okay, I'm going to stop there. So 5 questions. So Mom and Dad wanted him to go to school. What's the school name? That's number 1. Number 2, what's the principal's name? Number 3, it doesn't exactly say, but number 3, when do they go to school? Number 4, where do the kids take Augie? And number 5, how does Augie feel when he goes to the school? Okay.